Excellent, great. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Veronica Sullivan. I'm with DKS Associates and I'm a facilitator for today. I'm going to be starting off with Elizabeth. She will be the Spanish interpreter for tonight. And I'm going to start off with her providing instructions to those who require Spanish speaking translation.
Hola, buenas noches a todos y bienvenidos al taller virtual del proyecto Madera 2046. Les agradecemos por tomarse el tiempo de participar en este evento. Como pueden ver, para hacer un comentario público, por favor levante su mano virtual. El icono de una mano aparece en la zona de abajo. Los moderadores llamarán a cada persona y activarán su audio. Por favor, solo un comentario por persona y se aplicará un límite de 3 minutos por comentarista. Next slide. Para enviar una pregunta a través del cuadro de preguntas y respuestas, haga clic en la ventana de preguntas y ingrese su pregunta. Esto será visto y leído por los moderadores. Y si hay preguntas duplicadas, se responderán solo una vez, pero se mantendrán como parte del registro. Y next slide, please. Y para aquellos de ustedes que necesiten interpretación en español, está disponible y será proporcionada por mí. Si desea participar en español, por favor seleccione en la zona de abajo la opción para el idioma español, como puede ver. También puede levantar su mano o indique a través de la
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Liz. At the bottom of your screen, if you do require Spanish translation, there is an icon there, should be now, to translate from English to Spanish. And she is currently in the Spanish speaking room. Okay, and for those and the others, I would like to let you know at the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat box and a Q&A chat box as well. So the question and answer, your questions that you want directed directly to me or Dylan, feel free to ask all your questions in the question and answer. And in the chat box is, you can provide a chat to the entire group. Great. I'm going to hand off to introduce Dylan Stone.
Great. Thank you, Veronica and Elizabeth. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your evenings to join us here tonight. We're here tonight to talk about our 2022 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, or RTP and SCS for short, we would call those. This is a really important plan. It covers well, a lot of aspects in our region about how we get to and from where it is we need to go on an everyday basis, including where we live and what that's going to look like in the future and how that picture of our future plan can be more sustainable, more healthy, and less polluting. So there's aspects of this plan development we want to cover tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about what it is and what we've done so far. And then we're going to talk about some of the scenarios. We create scenarios for this plan that give us an idea of a direction that we should be going in when we ultimately complete this plan. We'll have an opportunity for everyone to give some feedback on some of the elements and finish up with just a question and answer period. So next slide, please. So we work on this plan as MCTC, the Madera County Transportation Commission. We are a regional planning agency and a metropolitan planning organization for Madera County. We foster intergovernmental coordination with our partners. We do comprehensive planning for the entire region, emphasis on transportation. We provide a forum for our citizens to give input on the process itself. And we provide technical service or help to our partner agencies. And our partner agencies, that is the City of Chowchilla, City of Madera. Next slide, please. The two cities, Madera County, we work with Caltrans and the tribal governments, and then individuals like yourselves, public stakeholders. So next slide, please. We also serve as the Madera County Transportation Authority, which oversees the Measure T half-cent sales tax for Madera County. This is a sales tax that was passed by 73% of Madera County voters in 2006 to invest in ourselves, to invest in transportation projects throughout the region. Typically, we do get a lot of funding that comes back to our area from either Washington, D.C. or Sacramento, those being the taxes we pay. This program keeps those here and directly is invested into our system locally and has a lot of local oversight on the decisions that get made with that. The Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy is one of our key tasks, though, as the MCTC. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the RTP. It is a mandated state and federal government plan. We're required to look long range. That means we look out 20 years into the future. This plan actually will look out beyond that to the year 2046. It documents our region's long-range multimodal transportation system investments. It looks at what our priorities are. It reflects really a shared vision that we have across all of our communities and our two cities. It links transportation investments with regional land use development, housing and employment, and really a lot of other things that we're going to talk about tonight. Next slide, please. So our plan will really have a lot of projects in it. When we talk transportation, we're talking everything from the biggest roads to our sidewalks, to public transit, even to electric vehicle usage, and our airports as well. We have 2 airports in Madera County. And this is a fiscally constrained document, meaning those projects, we have to have a reasonable assumption that we can pay for them in the future. We can't just have any project in there without a reasonable assumption that there will be funds to make it happen. Next slide, please. So one of the most important aspects of our regional transportation plan is the SCS, the Sustainable Community Strategy. The Sustainable Community Strategy is designed to help our state meet ambitious climate and air quality goals to improve the air quality for all of us. It also helps us advance community goals around public health, accessibility, equity, conservation, the economy, and more. It aligns our transportation, housing, and land use decisions towards achieving greenhouse gas reductions. Greenhouse gas emissions for what we're talking about with the SCS is the pollution that comes out of our cars and trucks that we drive on an everyday basis. And the California Air Resource Board is responsible for setting reduction targets for our region. Next slide, please. So in Madera County, we have goals that have been set by CARB, California Air Resource Board, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions per capita by 10% in the year 2020, and then in the future by 16% compared to what the level of pollution was in the year 2005. There's a lot of ways we go about doing this that we'll talk about in our plan. Next slide, please. So I just want to briefly touch on where we are thus far in this plan's development. We began in the fall collecting information. In the winter, we had several meetings in the community, online, meeting with our cities, with stakeholders. In fact, I think I see a few people that were participating at our meetings in the winter that are in our audience tonight. So it's good to see some people back. Next slide, please. We had, as I mentioned, we had workshops. We did meet with community members in Lavinia and Fairmead. Those were very informative meetings and very productive, we felt. We've had our interviews. We've had quite a few methods of online feedback that people can use. A mapping tool we have called Social Pinpoint, or they've participated in online surveys with us. We've had individuals that have been out at community events in Madera to get information from folks there as well. Next slide, please. There we are in Lavinia and Fairmead. those were good meetings. Those are two communities that they have a lot of things that they're very interested in seeing happen in their communities in the future. And they're things that really do align with the things we want our plan to accomplish. Things like having a better transit service, something that can be more accessible for people, looking at the condition of the facilities that are in their communities, making sure things are well maintained, adding either having maintenance projects for the roads or adding to what is on the roads in the form of sidewalks or safety amenities. Another important aspect that was brought up is having good quality internet in these types of communities so people can accomplish more in terms of online learning, or maybe they work online, or other things that can be set up that can be really helpful for everyone. So we got a lot of good info at these meetings. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we did have other methods where we were getting opinions from people, trying to figure out some of the things that they value as far as the plan we're working on. And I think we have got some telling info about improving our public transit service, connecting people to education and workplaces in rural areas was an important feedback that we got. Wanting to improve safety, really making it safer to get to and from places by walking or biking was a priority. Improving the conditions of our roads, having a well-maintained system was another comment that was given. And we also did ask about growth and what new growth, not necessarily what we already have, but what happens in the future as our county grows. What opinion people have about that. And a lot of the opinions said that we should be thinking about more compact type developments or looking at prioritizing some of our core urban areas. So these were all very productive and meaningful feedback that we received. And I think they're really helpful for the type of plan we're creating. Next slide, please. So I just want to jump back to really where we begin a plan like this, and we try to get the best understanding of what our conditions are today, identifying gaps, identifying needs, looking at what we have on the ground today, where our communities are, where our central transportation corridors are, and how they all are functioning. Then we get an idea of what our future might look like. We try to understand how we're going to grow, how many people we're going to have, and where new growth will occur, and what's going to be needed that helps facilitate that new growth. And so really it starts today, and the more we understand about what we are and where we are, the more we can identify our needs for when we plan into the future, what this plan is so very focused on. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of intricate tools that can help us do this. It starts with getting information, feedback from the public, information from our local agencies, the cities and the county or Caltrans, and we can apply a lot of what we learned to some of our tools. And one of our tools that we use for this planning process is called a travel demand model. Essentially what it is it's something that we can collect all sorts of various data, where homes are currently located, where jobs are currently located, some of the information about who lives and who works at these locations, and information that informs us how travel behavior, how travel behaves as it goes from one place or another. And with that, we can create essentially a model of our county. And as we learn things about our future, such as what our population projection might be, or what future projects our agencies are interested in building, then we can get an idea of how we're going to grow, and we get an idea of what the future might look like using our travel demand model. It's one of the key tools we use to get an idea of what conditions will be like that can help us make more informed and better decisions. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we use that model for is to think about land use for one, how we grow, what's the nature of new growth? And it's one of the things our model is actually built for, is to get an idea of where new land uses go, new homes and new jobs, and combining that with what type of projects connect those homes and connect those jobs and connect us to areas outside of Madera County. Those are some of the key foundations of our travel model. And it's one of the things that we start with as far as being able to understand different scenarios we develop. So using the information we have and some of the feedback we've received that we discussed earlier, we've started crafting scenarios. I'll talk about the 3 scenarios that we've been working with that we're going to want some of your feedback on here tonight. So the first scenario really looks at what we have today and says, what's the world look like if we keep doing things a lot like what we're doing, you know, moderate increases to other modes, a system that doesn't necessarily have the strongest focus on infill or compact densities. So this would be very much in line with trends that we already know about. Our scenario 2, though, looks at some of that feedback and really begins to build into what that feedback entailed, that we should have advanced investments towards other modes. We should look at how we can expand things like public transit, things like shared ride programs or zero emission vehicle infrastructure. And it combines transportation elements with land use elements by saying we should have a different focus for how new growth enters into our communities. Things like smaller lot sizes or things like having more dense communities in general for new growth as they come into the city or come into the county. And a third scenario, if we go to the next slide, please. A third scenario we've created takes that just one step further, where new growth is able to be prioritized into zones within our areas that have been designated for infill or designated for redevelopment. Looking at tighter, more compact lot sizes, especially in core and urban areas. And then where it's appropriate or feasible, moderate increases to density outside of urban core areas. And then an accelerated approach to modal shift transportation strategies or zero emission transportation strategies, such as zero emission vehicle infrastructure, really investing into our active transportation networks, looking at micro mobility, how we can use shared transportation services, whether they are shared cars to shared bikes, really quite a few other strategies that really we don't see a lot of yet today, but these are the type of things that we could grow into potentially, and it could really help us meet our objectives in this plan. We're actually going to talk about quite a few of those later and want to get your input on some of these strategies and what you think could work for us here. If we go to the next slide, please. So, you know, one of the key aspects, as I mentioned about SCS, is really combining land use and transportation. And we can use our model that I mentioned as a tool that can help us understand some of these things when we do apply various parameters to that process. And this just gives us an idea of some of the land use parameters towards new growth. And what this table really illustrates is as the scenarios progress, we're looking at, you know, by community, where we have room to have a tighter form in new growth, where we can shift the densities to be tighter and be in more compact forms. So there's less of a footprint for one, but really what we see is that when we do tighter compact growth, we're essentially creating a system that puts us closer to our either existing employment or services or needs, and it makes us have improves our decision-making process for other services or needs we can have, because things aren't so far apart. We don't have to go as far for all the things we need anymore. If we go to the next slide. And this is just more information. This will be available on our website too afterwards, but so I don't want to go through every number. That's kind of a number overload for a slide, but it just further illustrates where we're able to plan and make a goal out of changing some of our development patterns from the past towards these tighter forms. And this is an illustration of dwelling units per acre under the scenario by community, being the 2 cities, and we have what we call rural county, which is less populated areas around the mountains, foothills, or the valley, and then urban county, which would be representative of some of the areas that are around State Route 41 in the valley floor. If we go to the next slide, please. So we have been testing these a little bit, and we are using our model to get an understanding, and there are good metrics that can be seen progressively so as it relates to our goals of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions that our scenarios are being able to show us. And what we're finding is that the tighter we can have new growth be, the more we can be thinking about where it might go, prioritizing infill in our zones that we've identified for that. It can help us reduce the vehicle miles traveled. It can create a lot of new opportunities for housing types as well. We look at kind of the difference between single family attached growth versus attached dwelling unit multifamily housing growth. And that really opens the doors for a lot of more affordable housing opportunities as we get to see scenario 3, which have been expressed to us, and many others are sorely needed in San Joaquin Valley and in Madera County. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we've been focusing a lot about the land use aspect that we look at as we make scenarios, and it really is about the smarter decisions that we can make about where our new land uses go. The more we can reduce the need to make longer trips. We have a lot of data that shows that this type of housing can help us, average shorter trips per person on a daily basis as we do grow into these new homes and new growth. And that's a key aspect of what can help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions for the SCS. It all, as I mentioned, the greenhouse gas we're talking about comes from our cars. So addressing how we behave as we use our cars and, eliminating our need to make long trips is going to be a key aspect of how we accomplish the goals of that plan. Next slide, please. So we've been talking about land use, and there's a nexus between our land use and transportation. So this slide illustrates on the left how we get around today. And at the moment, we're a very car-dominated society, and that's evident by the graph that 81.7% of people travel by some type of car. Now, this combines single person trips to carpooling as well, but it's since we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions from the cars we drive, we wanted to categorize it as one, given that the investments that are made for streets and roads really apply to all those users together. Our data shows us that there are a lot of trips made by walking, but not a lot of people in our area are using public transit or biking compared to these other modes. Now, our graph on the right shows us our efforts towards investments towards the different modes. And it does correspond towards the streets and roads. They actually do end up being some of our most expensive projects. But in our past 3 plans, the portion that goes to public transit, active transportation, as well as other elements, other investments in this case include things like zero emission vehicle infrastructure or communication technology that can help manage some of our traffic systems, synchronization of signals. There's a few other categories that really fall into that as well, some of the system planning elements. But essentially, we're trying to make the piece of the pie bigger where we can on these other elements. And hopefully we can make meaningful and effective investments that, as we mentioned before, give people more choices, give people better options, and make some of these other modes more desirable and more practical as we think about what investments we can make for them. If we could go to the next slide, please. can we go to the next slide, or I might be on the pie chart slide still. I'm going to do a test here. If is Veronica or Elizabeth able to hear me? Well, okay, I think we might have had a technical snag here. This is a check for Elizabeth. Are you able to hear me?
Here, I'm able to hear you, Dylan. Give me one moment.
Okay.
I can screen share. Sorry about that.
We're going to take a brief intermission for a small technical snag. I apologize for that.
Go right ahead. Sorry about that, everybody.
Okay, we're back on. That was the briefest of intermissions. So we've been talking a lot about land use. We're starting to talk about some of the investments or some of the strategies that we can look at for a plan like ours when we have clear goals in front of us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Pueden ayudarnos a alcanzar nuestras metas.
Oh, hey, Elizabeth, just want to make sure that you're on the right channel. We just heard you for a second, but that's okay. That sounds like you are back on the right channel. And a lot of these strategies we want to talk about, because I mentioned we have a travel demand model, and it is a sophisticated tool, but it can't tell us everything. It is a tool that is largely designed to look at where we live, where we work, and in many respects, how we use vehicles to get to and from those places. But as we've mentioned, we're going to need to think about other strategies and other modes to meet our goals besides only vehicles. So there's a lot of strategies we want to look at that our model cannot account for, but can still be meaningful investments, can still advance our goals that we have of having healthier, cleaner, more accessible transportation options. So we want to talk about several of them tonight that, and we want to get your feedback really at the end of this too, that really can apply universally to our plan and not even be scenario specific so much, but really can be what that we can include with all these scenarios, regardless of which one ends up being the preferred final scenario for the plan. Can we please go to the next slide? Now, public transportation is already a big piece of our plan, as we saw 2 slides ago with our investment chart. And it'll continue to be important. It's a way a lot of people that are dependent on this type of service get to where they need to go every day, to work, to the store, to the doctor, to school, and so on. What we want to look at as we think about transportation planning in the long range too is, where can we increase or enhance our existing services? Where can we create new public transit connections where they don't already exist? Do we need to think about our fares, how frequent our routes come by, and what are the actual paths of those routes? Also looking at other elements that help our transit, not just the bus and the route, but things like our shelters, things like how we communicate our schedules, even how we communicate with people in a growing technical age using things like phone apps. How do we improve this service, and what are going to be meaningful investments? Next slide, please. And another that is a big part of what we do already, but we want to see how we can improve it even further, is our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure network. Making improvements to the active transportation networks in our communities and making non-motorized transportation a more viable choice for more people. This starts with, of course, maintaining what we already have, but making expansions on our network as well, finding the right places to put paths that people are going to use to get them where they need to go, and also making sure, as we mentioned, that it's safe, having safety signage, safety painting, or wayfaring that can direct us towards safe places that we can use for active transportation networks. Let's go to the next slide. Another strategy, one that we don't see quite as much in our area, would be either a bike share or a e-scooter type share of program. These are common in some of the bigger cities you might have seen. And a lot of times what we see in other areas is a precursor to the type of things we end up seeing in the valley later. But these are essentially services that can help us make a choice that maybe we can use a smaller mode to make a short trip around our community instead of getting in our car and taking the road and finding parking and then doing the same thing back. So it's not as common yet in the valley. We've had some interest actually from the private sector in doing a service like this in parts of Madera County that have contacted us. But what we want to find out is what people actually think, if they've seen this, if they're interested, if they think it could be an effective strategy to give more options for people in our community. Next slide, please. Telecommuting and virtual instruction. So this is really about, really a lot's happened in the past couple of years, as we all know, through COVID-19. Things like the platform we're using tonight, Zoom, has just skyrocketed in use and popularity in other ways to connect with people virtually. In a lot of ways, this could be something that can be helpful for our goals as well. There are certain people who can either go to college or go to even other school or other learning opportunities, or maybe their work can be done and they don't need to travel every day to wherever it is they do need to work. So a strategy like this really comes down to something we mentioned earlier, and that's how well we can connect broadband internet for everybody. A strategy like this really is tied hand in hand with having good quality internet access for everyone. So we want to find out if people think improving our internet, improving our ability to communicate is a strategy that can help telecommuting and virtual instruction and ultimately help us get some cars off of the road. Next slide, please. We've also looked at car sharing. These are subscription services that can place an electric vehicle in rural or low-income communities that people can share. This could be for any purpose as well. It could be in a very remote community that has enough people around it that want to use it to get to school, or maybe they want to go to an appointment they have or shopping that they need to do. This just connects more options for people that are lacking in options to get around. There's a company called MioCar that's actually been active in the San Joaquin Valley, and we've been in contact with them in the past about how we can support and expand that program for our various rural or less connected communities that are outside of the urban areas. So we want to see if people think being aggressive towards getting more of these here is something that works for our area, and if it's a strategy we should aggressively pursue. Next slide, please. Another strategy that we don't see too much of in Madera County is parking management. And this would be really looking at areas where we just have too many cars and too many people coming in and out of driveways and parking lots. And is there a management system that could entice people to maybe think about using another mode, maybe think about walking or biking or taking a transit service, or maybe one of the other strategies that we've discussed already. Something that can, help free up some of that stress that we see in some of our key or most busiest areas. So we want to know if people think this is viable for our area. And again, that it would have limited uses to really just kind of the busiest areas around our community. Another strategy that we are getting more and more involved with at our agency is zero emission vehicle and electric charging infrastructure. There's a lot happening as far as technology goes and transportation. We see more and more zero emission vehicles on the road. The industry is shifting, and there's a lot of laws and things happening right now in California, especially, that are changing the way our cars power themselves. In California, by the year 2035, it's mandated that all new vehicles sold must be zero emission vehicles. So there's a lot for us to consider and a lot for us to plan here as far as being able to accommodate that change. And we are actually working on a zero emission plan in our office right now, a zero emission vehicle and readiness plan. So we think this is going to be an important strategy. We want to know what all of you think about this as well. And I do want to plug that we are working on that plan, and there's going to be other opportunities specifically to give feedback or to learn about our future as it relates to zero emission vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. So intelligent transportation systems and transportation system management, these are things that help us manage the way our system works, the way our transportation system works through innovative new communication technology. This is things like the meters that are on freeway ramps that help control the amount of cars that get off or get onto a freeway. Things like synchronizing traffic signals in a city so that they can be timed correctly, so there's less time stopped at red lights for large groups of cars, or other things that are being built into cars now that can help them communicate with the road so we can get real-time information and conditions that can help decision makers make important choices about how to best manage transportation throughout the region. So looking at a strategy that can focus on what type of projects or what type of infrastructure can facilitate better traffic management would be the core around this strategy. Next slide, please. Another strategy is thinking about systems that connect people to the places of work. Things like van pools. One of the popular ones in the San Joaquin Valley is Cal Vans. And these are similar to some of the other things we talked about, that it's kind of like a program that you opt into through your employer, and it could take you to your place of work. Right now, I think there's several that go to the Chowchilla prison complex every day, and there's a lot of people that use this in Madera County on a seasonal level to go to ag labor jobs, and they take those to areas here in Madera County, or even as far away as places like Hollister, Salinas. I know there's some that go out there every year. So these are just things that can really help people connect to their places of work when their place of work isn't in a fixed spot every day. So a strategy around this would be working with Cal Vans to see how do we increase and improve how much access that people who live here have to go to their places of work, whether they work here or work somewhere else. And we have been in contact with Cal Vans recently about this too. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we look at how we connect these type of strategies that we can't put onto our scenarios that we show here. Our scenarios, we can use our model to get an idea of how they perform. And we show a mix of tighter compact densities and strategically thinking about where we grow help us as far as our performance. We see a lowering of VMT as we make these scenarios towards scenario 3. But combining those with all these other strategies and getting an understanding of really what we can accomplish if we think, beyond just, cars and road. Those are what are really going to help us create a good, sustainable community strategy that advances all of our goals, that meets the CARB greenhouse gas reduction mandates, and does so by making healthy community through accessible, non-motorized transportation choices, trying to make those as viable as possible where they can work in our county. If we could please go to the next slide. So we're looking at our scenarios at a technical level using our tools. We're also looking at the ones our tools can't necessarily account for, a lot of those scenarios we talked about, and we're looking for how we can think about what if we create goals around those strategies and we commit those to our plan, what does that ultimately mean? What can we learn from those that our model can't tell us? What can we figure out as far as what type of reduction those can make? And we are actually working on figuring that question out right now. I mentioned, we talked to people like Calvance to set goals for what they think they can grow in our region. We talk to people that have, private party interest in starting an e-scooter program and get an idea, well, what do you mean when you say that? What does that actually look like? We have really extensive active transportation plans and public transportation plans already that we're analyzing what is the impact if we build out as much of that as possible. So we are applying the things that we can't put on our travel model with things that we can use our travel model for to get a big picture idea of just how well we can create an SCS for our region. And I did want to mention here that we want to, I've been mentioning that we want to get info and feedback around some of these strategies that we want to apply. So we have set up a poll through this meeting that everyone can participate in, and we can specifically ask about those past 10 slides we looked at. Do you think that they work for this community? Do you think they're going to help us make a good plan? What's your opinion? So Veronica is actually going to run this poll. So Veronica, if you want to take it away, we'll do the poll and then we'll look at it and then we'll start a discussion that people might have about some of our strategies. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dylan. I really appreciate it. The poll should be on your screen right now. There are 9 questions regarding the 9 strategies that he went through. The first one is, are transit improvements a strategy our region should consider to reduce greenhouse gases? And it's also there in Spanish translation as well. So if you're in the Spanish speaking room, you can see the poll. If you could take a few moments, everyone could go to your screens and pick out if it's very important, somewhat important, not very important, or no opinion. For all of those 9 questions, that would be awesome. And then we can show all the results in real time. So we take a few minutes right now onto your screen. Awesome, got some people going. Are bicycle and pedestrian improvements a strategy that our region should consider? Number 3 is, are e-scooters and bike share program strategies really important? Number 4 is, are telecommuting and or virtual instruction a strategy that we should consider? Number 5 is, are car sharing opportunities a strategy that we should consider to reduce the GHGs? And then number 6 is parking management, an important strategy. Number 7 is zero emission vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Are they important strategies that we should consider to reduce our GHGs? And number 8 is transportation system management and ITS. So remember, ITS is intelligent transportation system, similar to the meters on the ramps and other improvements to existing infrastructure. And then number 9 are van pools and Calvans important strategies that our region should consider to reduce our GHGs. I'm going to give it about 1 more minute so everyone has a chance to look through the survey and then click submit. So far, we have 8 respondents, great. We have a bit more that would like to make sure everyone gets the opportunity to have their voice heard. Great, and then I'll give it more 10 more seconds.
Wait, we have a request for additional time.
Okay, sure. Take 2 more minutes, of course. Take your time.
And then while we wait for some finals to get completed, in the slide behind the poll, there's a version that you can see of a mapping tool we also have that lets people give feedback. There's a website that was posted in the chat. We'll post that again too before the meeting's over. But this tool, it really lets you go anywhere you want in Madera County, and it lets you give any comment you want about really everything we're talking about tonight. You can put a general pinpoint anywhere and leave a comment that says what you want to say about what you think, something maybe that you think you need, something you know other people might need, an idea you have, maybe something that you don't like, or something that you've seen that you do like, maybe something you've seen in another community you like that you think would work here. We really want people to feel free to give us whatever feedback they can. And we share this with our partners at the cities and the county, or our Caltrans as well. We have comments already on there about interest in having better transit service, as we mentioned, interest about new locations for charging infrastructure. As we said, more and more people are getting zero emission vehicles. So there's really anything that you think would be useful for helping us make decisions, how we make our plans. We want to hear it, and would encourage you to share it with someone you know. If maybe you don't have a lot of ideas, but you know that they're a person full of ideas, feel free to pass it along. The more we get on there, the more it helps us understand what people who live and work or travel through our community think.
There's also a lot of valuable information as well on the Social Pinpoint site about the About page. You can also learn about EV charging types, to know the difference between level 1 charging, level 2 charging, and level 3 charging. There's also links to plan improvements. You can look at all the different projects that are currently underway. This is a really valuable website, and it's a really fun tool. If you want to provide as much information as you like, you can upload images. You can just easily drop anything that you like and attach images of any safety concerns that you may have. All you have to include is your email, and then add a comment. Very simple to drag and drop.
And it works on your phone, which does make it easy to add a photo. You can take a photo and pull it right out of your gallery that you comment with.
There's also a side here as well that shows all the comments, which is great. You can like or dislike other people's comments as well. And you can also drag and drop transit service requests. Is any particular locations that you prefer to have new transit services located at? Excellent. Awesome. I'm going to end the poll now.
Okay.
I'm going to share the results to everybody.
Okay.
As you can see,
Cool.
Go ahead, Dylan.
All right. I was talking out loud. Go ahead, Veronica. You're good.
Oh, it's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in the poll. The first question is transit improvements, a strategy we should include. It's 67% said very, very important. And then 33% said somewhat important. Number 2 was bicycle and pedestrian improvements, an important strategy. And then 78% said very important, and 22% said somewhat important. So that's really good information to know. And our e-scooters and bike share programs, we're pretty split. 33% to very important, 33% to somewhat important, and then 33% to not very important. And for number 4, our telecommuting and virtual instruction and strategy, good important strategy, and 78% says very important, especially for myself. I think that it's definitely changed my entire life for telecommuting. So I think that it can really help when we're doing that kind of as well. Our telecommuting, number 5 is our car sharing opportunities, a strategy that a region should consider. And it's 44% said very important and 56% said somewhat important. Oh, this is really interesting. Number 6 is parking management and important strategy. It's pretty split in between all 4 options. The most,
Not surprised.
the parking tickets. Number 7 is zero emissions vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Is that an important strategy? And 67% said it's very important. 22% is somewhat important, and 1 voter also said no opinion. And we keep scrolling down to number 8 is our transit system management and ITS important strategies. The most common one was somewhat important with 67%. And number 9 is van pools and Cal vans, important strategies that our region should consider to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And 67% said very important, and 33% said somewhat important. Wonderful, that's a great variety of opinions. I'm gonna stop sharing. Thank you so much for all participating in that poll. It will also have that poll available on the website as well, so you can share your opinions and ideas.
Right. Yeah, very interesting indeed. Thank you, Veronica. So as she mentioned, we're going to have some more information about some of those and more opportunities for people to weigh in on if they think they could be effective for an area like Madera County. And, you know, like I said, I wasn't surprised about the parking one. That one's never super popular, but I think in some of the big areas, it can be effective. But it's something, as I mentioned, that, you know, all 9 of those right now, we can look at, you know, we can quantify what the greenhouse gas emission impact might be if we did have strategies that looked at those. So that's why we want to ask everyone what they think about them too. So we'll be coming out with more info on what the potential impact of those could be, and possibly some goals and some strategies based on the feedback we get, where people are very interested, think it's very important. We'll have maybe some aggressive goals set around those too, that can really give us an idea of what benefit they could bring to our communities.
Hey, Dylan, I think that Madeline Harris wants to, has her hand raised. Great question. Madeline, I'm going to unmute you and then see if you're able to speak. Madeline, can you hear us?
Hey, Madeline.
You can hear me too?
Yes, we can. Great.
Great. I had raised my hand not knowing if now was a good time for questions, because I have some questions from the presentation.
Sure.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, thanks for that presentation. That was really helpful to see where things are at with the RTP update. So I have several questions based on, you know, just some notes I was taking while you were speaking. I think where I'll start is, you know, you did a great job, Dylan, of recapping the priorities that that you heard from folks in Lavinia and Fairmead at the last workshops. And so I wanted to hear about, you know, how MCTC is working to incorporate that feedback. And then with regards to the different scenarios, how are we going to make sure that disadvantaged communities and particularly disadvantaged unincorporated communities are being prioritized for those investments as well?
Great. Yeah. So with the feedback, you know, one of the things we do is turn around not long after a meeting like the ones we had in Fairmead or Lavinia, or like our first workshop where we had some comments too from other areas. And we talk about them with agencies and say, you know, we've heard this. Is there something happening as far as a project or a plan or a program that addresses it? Is there something that maybe we already have in place, maybe something from our ATP plan, or maybe a plan that's been developed that has a lot of work behind it, something like the Lavinia Mobility Plan is one of those examples. And then starting that discussion, you know, how do we advance that forward? Where do we go? What are the steps we should be taking? And those are things that our plan is going to consider, identifying the type of funding that makes those things become a reality. And you know, some of these things are even happening, you know, before we finish this plan, as far as seeking out funding. applying through the state's ATP program for some of these projects that we're talking about right now in these communities. And that opened just last week. So it's about making those connections that are going to have meaningful progress towards seeing those funded, completed, and they are part of our what we prioritize. We do a process that looks at all the projects in Madera County, and there's a lot of projects when we look at all modes, but in each one of those, there's criteria that says there's certain reasons that make a project more desirable than others. And something we've added recently this year is, a higher emphasis on areas that are negatively impacted by pollution burdens or environmental burdens, air quality burdens, as well as population characteristic burdens, things like the level of literacy in areas or the level of education, other health factors. There's things that we've applied to our prioritization process that have, helped us, help other projects in other areas, give them other reasons to rise up. So these are applied now with this, with as well as a de-emphasis on some of the other metrics that used to be used, like level of service, where now we look at things like VMT. So there's several aspects that help that at the scoring and prioritizing level as well. But in a lot of ways, we have an ATP plan, we have a lot of completed plans, and a big part of this is, finding that path to implementing them, putting them on the ground and making them real.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I think we could probably all agree that at a certain point, in order to get some of these projects funded and implemented, the jurisdictions are going to have to use local dollars or money that they're getting from the state and federal government as well, and ensure that that is invested equitably across the county. So we're hoping that that will be reflected in the RTP as well. And I wanted to ask one other question, which is, you'd mentioned what the targets were in the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan update, by mode to meet the greenhouse gas emissions goals. And I wanted to ask about how MCTC is planning to adjust those targets in this update to ensure that it's not so, dependent upon cars and roads. And then also my question is that going to take into account the planned industrial development across Madera County and the expected truck traffic and pollution that is going to be brought by, more truck traffic through the county?
So as far as new development, which does include various types of employment, the way we think of development, we think of employment types, retail, accommodation, and industrial is also one of those. And especially around our two cities, they do have areas with a lot of industrial businesses. And in some cases, they do expect that there would be more. We do account for those type of things because those are really part of what our local plans entail. Now, our plan, the SCS, I mentioned we draw a lot from what our communities have planned, our cities and our county. It does have to have a consistency level with that, where this is not an independent plan that grows, wholly without that input. So it does take those into account, and there are certain investments that do need to be made to address any adverse impacts that a new business like that might have. How that affects maybe a pie like this, though, is in many cases, those type of businesses or those type of developments, they do have a component of, they can't necessarily develop there unless they contribute, unless they are part of fixing any adverse impacts that may be created. So in terms of a project investment, in a lot of cases, we do see there is an impact fee for new things that come online. As far as, making a bigger slice of the pie for other things, that's really what we want to explore. That's really what we want to show, that there is interest in in giving people better options and better choice and access. The more interest that we can show in that, that gives us an idea of having more viable investments and projects for these other modes that we can be thinking about making. And in turn, hopefully that changes both of these pie charts if they're effective. If what we think is an effective investment materializes to be true, then both of these pie charts end up changing. That one on the left that shows what people choose to use today is from a survey. We do every 10 or so years, we do a really extensive survey, household travel survey with people. And I think it would demonstrate an effective plan is when we do these, that pie does shrink. So that's why we want to learn about what people think will be meaningful investments, what they really do believe can work. And obviously, there's a lot of rural areas in our county. We're not quite as dense as a lot of our cities up in the north or south part of the state. We're really a product of how we've developed in the prior 60 years. And so we don't have a ton of growth to work with. So, being able to have really good information on what other strategies can work for us is going to be crucial.
Thank you so much, Madeline, for your question. I'm going to hand it over to Visite. Visite, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and you should be able to have permission to speak. You just have to unmute yourself.
Hello, how are you
Hello.
all? I have a here. Speak. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Sylvia Gonzalez. I live here in Lavina, and I would like to see if we could have sidewalks, street lights on one opposite side of the street, which is Avenue 9. There are self-help homes. We have street lights, but on the opposite side, we don't. So we would like to see if you could invest in putting sidewalks, lights. We've been asking for this for quite a while, and we haven't seen anything. So I'm hoping that you could help us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, would you mind repeating the street one more time? I didn't catch that.
There's also going to be more residents talking. Sorry about
Okay, go ahead. 9th Avenue, perfect. Continue.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Guadalupe Núñez y estoy hablando para a ver si nos ayudan a hacer el estudio móvil para que haya carreteras, banquetas, porque salgamos a caminar, porque no hay lugar también para caminar. Y si nos podrían ayudar, por favor, porque ya tenemos bastante tiempo pidiendo y no nos han ayudado. Gracias.
Ilse, would you mind translating that for us?
Yes. Can you see me? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So she said that her name is Guadalupe, and she was wondering if they can get assistance in rebuilding roads and sidewalks because they would like somewhere to go out and walk. They've been asking this for some time now, and they are looking for assistance now to get these things going.
So Guadalupe asked for the mobile study.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you. And I have another resident. Thank you.
Okay.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Lourdes Castillo. Quiero para ver si ponen el internet, porque aquí no hay internet para que estudien los niños, tienen que irse hasta el colegio o al pueblo. A ver si nos podrían ayudar para que salgan adelante los niños, no anden en la calle, que no hayan que hacer. Gracias.
Yes, so that was Lourdes Castillo. She is requesting for internet access out there because there's no internet. They go out to schools to obtain access, and they would like to get internet access out there to help out students and, continue to move forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Visite, for facilitating that. Is there any other residents on your side?
Yeah, I have one more resident.
Yep, go ahead. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es la señora Berta García y quiero que por favor nos ayuden porque aquí en la vina no hay muchas luces, está muy oscuro para caminar a veces en la noche y queremos por favor a ver si nos ayudan a ponerlas porque ya es mucho tiempo desde que estamos aquí en la vina, no nos han hecho caso de venir a ponernos las luces y siempre cada vez que venimos es muy oscuro para nosotros. Y queremos que nos ayuden para las luces y para un parque y para que jueguen los niños, para que haya más seguridad en la calle. Gracias.
Yes, so sorry, I didn't catch the name, but it is a community member from La Viña. They're requesting street lights since it's there's not a lot of lighting on the streets, especially at night. They've been requesting this for some time now, and they would like to get some assistance in getting this implemented within the community. They're also requesting for a park for kids to play, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Visite, and thank you for all the residents that have participated. We definitely appreciate for you attending. We know that Dylan will definitely be taking those down. We have written them down as well, so that we'll share them with the MCTC team.
Hi, sorry, can I just ask a couple questions? This is Leticia now.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So one of my questions is, so when is this list going to be published? Like what's the timeline for that?
It's not really ready yet. I know there's as you're aware, we're working on a couple of plans here at the same time that are really related, that helps form what we think our future investment pattern can look like. However, based on what we can learn here about some of our other strategies, we might be able to think about where a few of those can be going towards, if we think some of these will work. But we do plan to have the comprehensive list of projects published with this plan in the draft, and that takes into account all of our transit investments, our maintenance, any kind of roadway or other projects, and they're still being worked on, and that's happening in conjunction with how we form our funding picture, which we're looking at the future investment plan as well through the Measure T.
I'm so sorry, Dylan, but I had Spanish translation on and you all were talking at the same time, so I didn't really hear you. When are you all making plans to have that out? Because I know Measure T, they're trying to put it on the ballot in November, so.
Well, we're ahead of that schedule, so ours will be here later in the spring.
Later in the spring, would that be May or April?
Yeah, May is probably a good bet as far as getting into that level of detail. Yeah, but we're definitely ahead of the measure part. That's why there's been a lot of activity with the measure as well, because we have to complete what we're doing before that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for facilitating that, Leticia. The next person will be Anthony. Anthony, I'm going to unmute you.
Good evening. I live up in the Oakhurst area. We have almost a total lack of public transportation here. We're a very wide, spread out area. I work with Yosemite Adult School, And our biggest barrier to those students that want to complete their high school diploma or want to take career technical education or English as a second language or citizenship is just the ability to get into Oakhurst or our campus in Course Gold. And as I wrote in the comments, Eastern Madera County provides the lion's share of the transient occupancy taxes, yet we once again do not get the services. As I said, we have basically no public transportation up here. There is a bus that does, I think they're up to 2 runs, but in order for a student to leave Yosemite Lakes Park to get into Oakhurst or down to Madera Community College, it will be an entire day's event. This is a huge barrier, socioeconomically, educationally, et cetera. And we truly, truly, truly need to be seen as part of Madera County and not just have our transient occupancy taxes, our property taxes, and all of the other taxes that we pay. With the increased price in gasoline, a trip from Oakhurst to Fresno or to Madeira is, and I'm driving a fairly gas efficient vehicle, it's costing me over $50. Yarts used to have bus service, and why the County of Madera, in their quote unquote infinite wisdom, never believed in YART, it is beyond me. We need to solve the transportation problem, where you're going to have a significant population that is feeling disenfranchised. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thanks, Anthony. So I remember from the last meeting too, that we talked about this as well, about the need to connect people to education, especially, as well as other things that, you know, they could benefit from connecting with. So we have talked to the MCC provider or and the county transit staff about this comment, and it is definitely a challenge because of the large geographic area. However, we are aware of your comment, and we're considering it and thinking about, you know, the type of options that work for rural areas and what we could do different, or what we can learn and apply to a plan like this, where it is the long range plan. Maybe we can have new aspects that can change, such as communication and technology. We talked about distance learning, online learning. You know, that could something that could be combined for some individuals too, to help them. And then as far as the arts, the county currently is looking to get more yard service. They've had some serious drawbacks to service due to the fires and then during the pandemic. But the county is very interested in becoming a member with yards and having that service remain.
Thank you so much. We have one more hand up. Madeline Harris, back to you.
I have a question about what you were saying, Dylan, about the coordination between the RTP and the Measure T renewal. Because in my participation in the Measure T steering committee meetings, we're being told that the outreach and public engagement that was done for the Measure T investment plan update was from the RTP workshops and the public engagement that y'all are doing on this process. And so what I don't understand then is, if that is the case, then why doesn't the proposed Measure T investment plan reflect the priorities that residents have been raising in these workshops? Because, for example, the proposal that we were given recently only put 2.5% of Measure T dollars towards public transit, and it would create a competitive program where people would have to apply for projects for clean mobility. But what we're seeing in the public feedback on the RTP is like very much the opposite, that people actually do want a lot of investment in public transit, sidewalks, active transportation infrastructure, and clean mobility. And so I'm not understanding if this is supposed to be the same outreach process for Measure T, then what's the disconnect?
Well, I think calling it the same wouldn't be the best way to do it, but saying that, we have a lot of overlap. And I've mentioned this before, and I think it's been mentioned in the plan that we really need to utilize all of our outreach opportunities that we have, given, the size of our agency itself. And so I utilize what we learned from this process for the RTP. I utilize what we've learned from our meetings that happened last year, that before the RTP happened, for the ATP plan or for our transit plans. These are things that collectively apply to what we work on in the RTP, because the RTP is all is a comprehensive plan. And as far as looking at the discussion around Measure T program, that is an ongoing discussion. And we do share what we're going to learn tonight with the Measure T team. And perhaps that can inform a new direction for that discussion, or open things up for things to be considered as that discussion does continue.
Are there any other questions? Anyone feel free to raise your hand. If not, I'll hold for another minute or so. You're a bit 7:20. Okay. And I think that's about it. There's also the survey and Ophelia. Go ahead, Ophelia.
Hi, just a question. In regards to like the electric kind of scooters, or I assume maybe like bike sharing, how would that be fun? Would that be like a third party that would come in? Because I mean, I used to live in bigger cities where they had that, and it was very, very expensive, where, it would be like $20 for like 15 minutes. And it was just not really, it was more for fun rather than for actual transportation. So how would we get people to, would it be affordable?
Yeah, that definitely, $20 for 15 wouldn't work for anybody, I don't think. But yeah, these would generally be what we've seen as larger entities, can franchise out their system, and the idea to make them usable, they have to be affordable, or else again they're a novelty and they're not a real solution. But right. the idea that we would see for service like that would be in areas that would benefit from having whoever's taking these short trips, choose that and having it be affordable, have it be accessible, have it in a way like almost the way people can use Uber very easily. They could have just say, oh, this company has a brand, let me just download their app and now I can use their service. Or now that's usually how the ones I've used have been, that you can unlock and use their service by downloading their app and treating it like any other of these transportation type of businesses, like an Uber or a delivery service. But yeah, it definitely would have to be structured around something that makes sense for people to use on a regular basis, and not a novelty, not a toy that's not a ride at a carnival or something like that, where at a carnival you spend $20 for a short little kick.
Thank you so much, Julia. Do you have another question?
Yes. So also, if we have these, wouldn't we need the sidewalks or the bike lanes to make them safe as well? Because yes. Again, Madeira, there is a lot of areas where there's no sidewalks. And again, the sidewalks may not be in the best condition. So even if you wanted to use these, you might not really be safe using them.
No, it definitely goes hand in hand with having a safe system on which to operate a vehicle like that. And then that's a goal that needs to apply broadly, not even if we don't have something like that. But if a business like that does take off, then it would definitely be incumbent upon having the system that could accommodate it safely.
Thank you.
Or else there's not going to be the interest to start it. It'd be probably a liability nightmare.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that answer.
Right. Thank you so much, Ophelia, for your comments. I appreciate it. All right. If there's no other hands raised right now, I'll give it another few seconds. Madeline, one more time.
Thank you so much. I realized I forgot to say something, which was that you mentioned the Mio Car program. And I know in some of our past community meetings in Lavinia, there's been some interest in an electric rideshare program. So I just wanted to elevate that in response to your question, asking for feedback on that. And I remember at the last RTP workshop that we had in Lavinia, there was a discussion around wanting to put some like electric vehicle charging stations and other, just increasing access to electric vehicles. I don't know if that could also, I don't know if there's a way to incorporate like a electric vehicle, assistance program to help folks who may not be able to afford electric vehicles, like be able to afford them. But I just remember there was interest about that in Fermi too. So I wanted to be sure to communicate that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and that's definitely something that we're thinking about. Electric vehicles being effective and getting into our market means they got to be affordable. And especially in the San Joaquin Valley, that's something we're relaying up the chain too, because this is happening, not just here, but everywhere. So we want to let them know that, in the San Joaquin Valley, over 50% of people never buy a new car. There's definitely a different demographic of car market buying in an area like ours, and we need to be thinking about that when we have this wide scale shift in what powers our vehicles. So there's a lot to consider. We're thinking about things like that in our ZEV plan as well. What are the gaps and what's going to be necessary to make ZEVs work in our area everywhere?
Great, thank you so much for everyone for attending today. It's 7:25. I just want to give back to everyone for 5 minutes. I want to appreciate taking your time this afternoon. We're really, really grateful and hope you continue to participate in this project. You can find all the materials on yourmadera.com. They'll provide you on the right-hand side a survey of the current survey that we talked about, and the bottom is the link to the Social Pinpoint Site. You can add the contact page where you can provide your information as well. It'll say your hands are up. Is that okay? Are you unmuted?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just did want to point out that there was a question from Carla. I'm not too sure if we wanted to go ahead and address it now or later.
Is there a plan to have workshops in North Fork, Harpetsdale areas?
We are looking at actually Oakhurst for a workshop, as well as doing some more of these online ones if available, later in the spring. We haven't looked at North Fork itself yet, but I'd like to maybe learn more about what you're thinking. If you want to contact me, my contact info should be on either our website or at this presentation. Or I think when you registered, it might have been there as well too. But yeah, we're always looking for ways to connect, and we do. We're currently have some dates potentially for Oakhurst right now, Chowchilla, and then we're working on finalizing some stuff in Madera coming up soon as well.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful night and really appreciate it. I hope you continue to participate with our project. All right, have a great night and see you all next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.